The Hidden and Untold History of the Jewish People and Ethiopians. Volume 1. Dr. Fikre Tolossa, Ph.D. Introduction. This work consists of Jewish history, most of which was hitherto untold and unpublished outside Ethiopia in any language. As such, it has been hidden from the Jewish people and the world at large. Even though the history of the Jewish people and of Ethiopians is interconnected, and the two people share the same history to a significant extent, the Jews are not aware of it. The truth is that the two people have shared some chapters of the same history, and even worshipped the same God for the past 4,000 years, besides enjoying a lot of the same culture. If the Jewish people dig deeper and search for a vital chapter of their history, they will find it documented in and interwoven with Ethiopian history. Furthermore, Jewish religious practices and rituals, elaborate Levite attires and sacred objects, as well as Jewish tribes and Jewish holy objects such as the Ark of the Covenant, with its 2 tablets in which God himself wrote the 10 Commandments that seem to have been lost for good in Israel, have been preserved in Ethiopia. Despite the fact that numerous Ethiopian priests are black and Christian outwardly, they claim to be the descendants of Jewish Levites, and they practice elements of Judaism in their Christian worship. Each Christian church keeps in its Holy of Holies a replica of the Ark of the Covenant to validate itself as the house of God, besides using copies of the priestly garments and sacred wares of Aaron. In Ethiopian, Tiwaro indigenous Christian church was and is incomplete without a replica of the ark and ancient sacred objects such as incense burners, drums, and colorful umbrellas that protected the ark from scorching sunlight, as in the days when the ark was wandering in the Sinai desert for 40 years together with the Jewish people. And when Ethiopian priests speak about Abraham and Moses, they refer to them as our forefathers. People think that the only links between the Jews and Ethiopians are the Falashas, the Beta Israel. This is far from being true. The Falashas were not the first Jewish settlers in Ethiopia either. There were many other Jews who had settled, not only in Ethiopia, but also sat on the Ethiopian throne 1,500 years prior to the arrival of the Falashas in Ethiopia. Indeed, the Falashas were the last comers to Ethiopia and not the first ones, as we will see in this book. Whereas the Jewish people and their descendants were discriminated against and persecuted in other countries. Not only they felt at home in Ethiopia and prospered, but they also had the privilege of serving as priests. They even sat on the Ethiopian throne as kings, queens, and emperors. Truly, the Jewish people in Ethiopia exercised power, accumulated wealth, and enjoyed individual and religious freedom they were denied elsewhere. Ethiopian emperors of the past 3,000 years considered themselves to be offshoots of King Solomon and representatives of the Solomonic dynasty in Ethiopia. There have been 225 emperors who reigned in Ethiopia, representing the Solomonic dynasty all the way from the first emperor, Menelik I, who was the son of King Solomon and Queen Sheba to Haile Selassie 1 or I. The last emperor of Ethiopia who claimed descent from Menelik I, or 1, until he was overthrown by a popular revolution in 1974. The present book will throw light on some of the Jewish kings and emperors who reigned in Ethiopia before the advent of Christianity. The second volume will handle Jewish and Ethiopian history of the Christian era, mentioning the most important representatives of the Solomonic dynasty in Ethiopia. I am not certain that Abraham recorded his life history in writing. He had no reason to do so. Even if he was literate, he was neither a king nor a priest. His descendants did record it either until Moses wrote it or had it written by scribes about 650 years after the days of Abraham. It was not so with Melchizedek, the friend of Abraham and the forefather of the Ethiopians, as well as his descendants who had been priests and kings that recorded everything which revolved around their lives and kingdoms. No wonder then that Ethiopian priests and kings, the descendants of Melchizedek and his son Ethiop, recorded the life of Abraham and his relationship to them and their children. I contend that Moses learned a lot about the ties Abraham had with Melchizedek and his family from Jethro, his father-in-law, who was a direct descendant of Melchizedek through Ethiop. Unfortunately, Moses didn't choose to dwell on it in detail in the books ascribed to him. Therefore, it shouldn't be surprising if the story I am presenting in this work is new to the Jewish folks in particular and the world at large in general.